emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 837.EX0204. Certificate number 42582. Elizabeth Nietzsche.
Gesundheit. Nietzsche. We're going to hear from Germans who are mad that we're not saying Nietzsche, like the ones they get mad at the
Nietzsche.
Americanized Goethe.
Nietzsche.
But you can't say, no American is going to take the time. We're a busy people. We've got a frontier to populate.
Nietzsche.
We're just going to say Nietzsche.
Nietzsche. Although, you remember, for years we said Nietzsche.
Yeah, and it
What
led
was
to
that
the
about?
well, it led to the do you know the Nietzsche-Sartre formulation of philosophy?
Well,
Nietzsche is peachy, but Sartre is smarter. I guess you have to say Sartre also for that to work.
Sartre is Sparter.
Is smarter.
Jean-Paul Sartre drives the Dodge Dart.
So you're just saying people should be grateful. The future should be grateful that we're not saying Nietzsche.
We could be saying Nietzsche.
So that's the threat we're holding to your head, annoyed Germans.
Nietzsche loves a lychee.
We'll say Nietzsche. Don't think we won't.
They do say Nietzsche?
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche.
And in fact, I found a thread online where a German was throwing up his hands at how simple it is. It is just like how it is spelled, Americans. Nietzsche. You see the Nietzsche. You see the ch.
Nietzsche.
He has a very difficult name to spell. When did you first come up against the name? Do you remember when you first learned that there was a person with that unlikely succession of consonants?
Yeah, because I was, pseudo-intellectual in early, well, I guess in late high school, early college, where I was talking about Nietzsche.
To impress girls?
I was talking about Nietzsche a long time before I'd really read any of it or understood any of it.
That's not uncommon, by the way, as we'll see for his oeuvre.
Yeah, and then I think it was maybe the third time I returned to college, when I was at that point in my mid-20s, that I started to be assigned those readings and have that sort of Hegelian year.
You never had the surface level grappling with Nietzsche that can happen in seventh grade when you read Jack London, or 10th grade when you read
It was
Crime
Herman
and
Hesse, I
Punishment.
think, or
Yeah.
like the Siddhartha kind of era.
I guess that raises the question of why high schools are assigning these kind of sinewy, awful Nietzschean protagonists to kids. Is it because they think girls will read anyway? Girls will read Anne of Green Gables, but you have to trick the boys by having them read about axe murderers and...
I mean, it's better than Ayn Rand.
but it's one step away.
I know.
Nietzsche is exactly Ayn Rand in that... Richard Spencer, our beloved dapper Nazi, when he was kind of getting lovingly profiled for some reason in the Atlantic, he was always telling people that I was red-pilled by Nietzsche.
Yeah.
So he's one of these people that had one semester and was like, damn, yeah, no, I see the truth now. Thanks, Friedrich.
Well, there's that whole argument that philosophy, classical Western Enlightenment philosophy, ended at Nietzsche. Kind of, it all was a natural progression to Nietzsche, and then Nietzsche, and it all then post Nietzsche, there was nothing, or there was no more need for.
That's not very flattering
philosophy.
to him. He broke the whole endeavor. It's like the guy at the Airbnb who, dozens of people have stayed here, but then this guy broke the mirror and broke a leg on the armchair.
It's a lot harder to assign high school students to read Derrida, I think, or it's harder for the teachers to be able to explain what they've read.
My guess is it's just the multiplicity of movements with a broader, more educated post-industrial world. You get 100 people doing 100 things rather than a curated arc of one guy at a time.
Right.
I'm going to extend what I'm Plato. I'm going to extend what Socrates did. Well, I'm Aristotle. I'm going to extend what Plato did.
That's exactly it.
That's a lot easier for kids to put in an outline.
Well, and it just seemed right. It was presented to us as just like an inevitable staircase of like, like
even before it happened, you could look ahead and be like, oh, I bet Kant is coming.
You really could, and that was the syllabus. I mean, it really was. The syllabus made it seem
the illusion of inevitability.
Yeah. Well, and that each was building on his priors in a way that suggested a path to truth.
Well, there is something a little apocalyptic about Nietzsche's work, right? And you can see what fascists or even like dopey grifter fascists like Richard Spencer would see in it. All the stuff about the old world has ended. The West is in civilizational decay.
You will yourself to power.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We have to discover what the new thing is. I guess, God is dead.
Right.
He's very quotable is the thing about Nietzsche. That's another reason why all these freshmen probably, they're like, ooh, wow. When you gaze into the abyss gazes also, that makes you think.
Oh, the number of times you
just want a t-shirt.
I sat sat outside on the steps of the dorm and just said that to everyone passing by. That's how how it was so popular in
Even
college.
the stuff that's not complete sentences is like smart sounding little sound bites. The Eternal Return, the Ubermensch.
Right. Smart sounding, but also makes you feel like they're cliff notes to his actual work, so that if you kind of string the quotes together, you feel like you can claim to be like a Nietzschean, right? You can claim to.
Yeah, how are we going to say that word now that we can't say Nietzsche anymore? You can say Nietzschean, but I'm not going to say Nietzschean.
But like you cannot. Kant doesn't have those quotes. So in order to say you're a Kantian, you really have to be able to back that up with a couple of sentences. Hegel is quotable. There are more Hegelians than I would like, frankly. In the colleges.
In your friend circle?
Yeah, there really are. I wish that I could have chased a few out. A new broom sweeps clean.
It's kind of a problem with Nietzsche is that he's so quotable that he's understood via aphorisms.
Right.
Because it's very easy to take these aphorisms out of context. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger is great from a football coach or whatever. But that's not what he meant by it. In particular, the fascist uses of his work. The National Socialists in Germany and the Italian fascists both loved Nietzsche. I'm sure the Italians said it wrong because you can say civilization is in decay, and then you can just say because of Jews.
Right.
Or when he says, Nietzsche was very pro. What Christianity had done to the West, kind of the civilization it had built. And that's why he's concerned with God being dead. What replaces it but nihilism? How do we invent something new in the age where science and reason have made God seem unnecessary? Like evolutionary theory has explained life, and cognitive theories explaining consciousness, and cosmological theories explaining the universe. And, so what do you have now? What's your organizing structure? Because he was a big fan of the hundreds of years of progress that have been built by that. But he had no real time for any of the Christian pieties.
Right.
Nietzsche doesn't care if you're, and I think that resonates with the fascists. This idea that, well, we love the cathedrals, but being nice to your neighbor, that's a little limp-wristed, Jesus.
Well, I think we are still in the late 20th century wrestling with, and I feel like every week on Twitter, I'm wrestling with some commenter who's asking what basis morality, right? Like what if not God, if not,
You have a better class of commenter than I do.
well, you'd have more, so it's harder to filter through.
It's harder to find the Hegelians.
People always want to hear. Well, they don't want to hear what I think. They want me to hear what they think. But
That's what a commenter is.
but that's
Someone who didn't like your comment enough to leave it alone.
It's absolutely true that that we're living in an era where we have demystified or deconstructed all the systems of oppression, but haven't replaced all of them with new systems, with non-oppressive like systems that fulfill those roles. And everybody's got a different version of them right now.
Nietzsche did.
He sure did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, which we now think of as kind of a barrel-chested Bavarian or something.
Right. It's right there in the name.
Well, only because he was German.
Übermensch!
If he was like a Chilean philosopher,
Yeah.
it would be.
What is it in Spanish?
I don't know.
Overman.
Hyper hombre or something.
See, that's a lot.
He's
that's
hyper hombre.
That's a lot sexier.
We love that guy. He seems like he's from the future. But Übermensch
hombre.
Übermensch is just corrupted by the umlaut.
Yeah, it's
like the second you see the first letter, you're like,
Oh, metal band.
this is trouble. This can be misused. But he never said like what we need is a strong white member of the Volk who's
Or, let alone an army of them.
right. Like he's just saying it's got to be something. Like we need a new future person, or we're doomed to nihilism. And maybe in hindsight, maybe he should have said, and it shouldn't be a genocidal
Anti-Semitic
army of Germans.
Right.
Because our idea of Nietzsche is at best incomplete, and thanks to the National Socialists, very inaccurate. Nothing frustrated him as he was writing in the late 19th century more than what he called race fraud. He hated the kind of anti-Semitic race baiting in Germany at the time and wrote about it vigorously. He was friends with Wagner, which is convenient if you're Hitler, but he broke with Wagner because he was tired of Wagner just writing about the Jewish menace all the time.
Right.
To the degree that many movements have appropriated Nietzsche. It's not just Richard Spencer slavering over it as a, freshman philosophy student. Like the anarchists loved Nietzsche. The Zionists love Nietzsche, honestly. Like if you want to be the new man founding Israel, Nietzsche's your guy.
Right. And that's kind of why it feels like he's the last step on the ladder, because
it splinters into everyone who read him differently.
It does. Right. I mean, it splinters into, because what you get after that is a bunch of nation states, right? Yeah. Politically, we're no longer talking about your people, right? Like the French. You're talking about the nation of France. We're talking about it's a turning point politically and philosophically.
Does that make it a difference, you think, when it's a government and not a heritage?
Well, I mean, but the heritage is still plays a big role in nationalism, obviously, yeah. Right? But it's but there's no longer that, like, I don't know, the contiguous arc of time. It's starting in what 1900 or 1848 even.
Yeah,
there's a splintering of old systems, and I mean, I hesitate to say that we're still. Well, I guess I don't hesitate to say that.
Yeah, we are.
We're still just all those same marbles in a bag.
And it probably would have happened before if you hadn't had the hegemony of the Western Church, right?
Or of whichever the latest Western Church was. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the Western Church started splintering 500 years before.
But it did a pretty good job of holding Western thought contained to one system. Even if you had new ideas, you had to explain how they reconciled with the book of Ezekiel or whatever.
Yeah, and I guess
everybody had these common assumptions, which were, I'm not saying they weren't oppressive to huge swaths of the earth.
But everything was, like, a lot of the authority was based on continuity from an original source.
Yeah.
Right? The king could trace his lineage back, but the church could.
The Pope can too.
And the languages all could, and the ideas could. And then you had in that aftermath of all those revolutions, now you had free-floating ideas that the idea could govern people across all those lines, and that it wasn't continuous, or it wasn't contiguous. It was new. It was new, novel. That those could be systems of government. Marx. It all goes back to Marx. Every conversation you and I have goes back to Marx.
It's usually me pulling it back. I mean, Nietzsche sees that as an opportunity. I mean, his work is complicated and his viewpoint changes over time. He's got a restless intelligence. He's tackling all these ideas over his fairly brief writing career.
He was only active for 20 years, right? I mean, more or less.
Yeah, the last 10 years of his life. Interestingly, talking about his German heritage, there was no Germany, but he was of Prussian birth,
Saxon.
So
or something.
And easy to. It's easy for somebody like that to be appropriated into the Volk in the 20th century by the Nazis. But in fact, he spent his whole life bragging about his heritage as Polish nobility, which is interesting because he in fact had no heritage in Polish nobility. He just liked to say he did.
Invented it?
Yeah, he preferred for whatever reason not to be thought of as Prussian or Saxonian.
Huh.
Saxon?
Saxon. Also a great metal band.
His career ended in 1889 when he was only 55.
1889, he was in his 40s.
You're right. He was born in 44. So he's in his mid-40s. He's roughly my age. Oh, wow. That's like, when you're 33 and you outlive Jesus, that's one thing. But when you outlive Nietzsche, he had a severe mental breakdown at the beginning of January 1889 on the streets of Turin. And nobody, he was taken in by the police for making a scene, and nobody really knows what happened. In the most common version, he was at the other end of the Piazza Carlo Alberto, and he saw a horse being whipped by its owner or rider.
And that was the final straw.
That pushed him over the edge, which, you kind of like that imbalance in a radical thinker like him. The fact that something like that, in the common account, he ran over to the horse and threw his body over it to protect it from the flogging, and then just collapsed. And that was it. He lived for another decade, but
insensible.
Yeah. He immediately started writing these crazy letters where he talked about how, he was the creator and the Pope should go to jail, and, he loses his identity and his faculties.
And so how much, both in his time and now, does an end like that cause you to, or cause his peers and cause us to reflect back on his writing and his insights and see them potentially as a
warning, early symptom?
Well, no, but like coming from a place of whatever that line is, whatever that William James line is, where inspiration trends to, kind of bleeds into divine inspiration and bleeds into mental illness.
Does it discredit the work?
That's what I'm wondering.
Or is it even
It doesn't
better?
to me, but did it to his peers?
I mean, today we kind of have the opposite effect where people will listen to these unlistenable Syd Barrett songs just because it's fascinating that he went crazy,
Right.
It gives it some sense of drama or moral heft in the lyrics.
But all of, a lot of the post-60s stuff, it's all of our rock heroes who lost their minds, we can kind of just point to LSD and say, oh, it was LSD, right? That caused a break. It's much harder to... I
guess I just assumed that all these geniuses, even at his era, were skating perilously close to the edge.
And schizophrenia usually manifests itself a lot earlier than 44.
So to this day, it's not well understood what was going on in his head. Was it, at the time, people just said syphilis, because that's what you always said when somebody went crazy.
Oh, syphilis was the LSD of the 1860s.
Yeah, man. Have you tried listening to this song on syphilis? It's amazing. It has some downsides that LSD did not. But I think that was just what you would say when an intellectual went crazy.
Right.
You're like, yeah, this guy probably has slept through every prostitute in Paris. Or
now he's got spongiform encephalitis.
Right. But there's other theories. He might have had a meningeal tumor. There just wasn't the medicine at the time to be sure. Today we could check. Does Nietzsche have a tumor? Was it mercury poisoning? Like all these things that were kind of pinpointed later. It could have been any of them.
Was he eating lead, chips, paint chips?
Was the horse covered in lead? Did he accidentally just hug a horse covered with mercury? So for the rest of his life, he's taken care of by his mom, Francisca, for several years. And then when she returns from overseas, his sister, Elizabeth Nietzsche.
Oh, the notorious Elizabeth Nietzsche.
You say it with some kind of fascination, like you're also attracted to her.
She's so notorious. So notorious that I can't not be fascinated by her.
She's kind of the villain of this piece, but she's a fascinating character. Anyway, so Nietzsche leaves the story now in his sister's care with a series of strokes leading to paralysis and finally a third stroke a decade later that kills him. But that doesn't stop new work from coming out. He's the Tupac of the 1890s because Elizabeth keeps
sending holograms of him to Coachella.
Essentially, repackaging work. And it's like you say, because he aphorizes so well, she can produce all these selective works. We think of the will to power as a classic Nietzschean formulation, but that's actually just the name of the book she cobbled together out of his other writings while he's drooling in her guest bedroom.
Really?
Yeah.
That wasn't his thesis.
I'm sure he used the words will to power, but it's kind of like the Übermensch, where all he says is, we need a decisive new man to do something new. And if you asked him, hey, would that thing be forming an army and killing 12 million people, he would be like, no, that's not the new way. That's violence. That's the lowest thing.
Right.
He literally wanted reinvention.
Sure. A decisive secular messiah.
Yeah. So I'm sure he meant something muscular and individualistic and forward thinking when he says the will to power. But I'm sure he does not mean we need one scrawny man in a mustache to pretend he's a muscular messianic figure.
But also not someone working only for his own like self.
Right.
What am I looking for? What is the term? What for
self-aggrandizement?
Yeah, right. He's not looking.
Because that's what we mean by Nietzschean today. Is
right.
When English teachers bring him up when they're reading Dostoevsky or Jack London, what they mean is
a man who answers to no one, who
cares little for the bourgeois morality of his time.
Right, reality creating, but for himself, not for. Right. But right. And that's not what Nietzsche meant at all.
No, I don't think so. But that is what his followers meant, specifically his post-World War II followers. I mean, Leopold and Loeb murdering people just to show that morality wasn't for them. They're drawing it from Nietzsche, but it's filtered through all the anti-Semitic readings of his work. And for that, we have Elizabeth Nietzsche to thank.
Thank you, Elizabeth Nietzsche.
Well, I don't think we should.
Oh, so we don't thank her.
For that, we have Elizabeth Nietzsche to blame.
Yes.
Screw you,
Damn
Elizabeth
you,
Nietzsche.
Elizabeth Nietzsche.
Verdammt Elizabeth Nietzsche. She, unlike her brother, she was a rabid anti-Semite. We always say they're rabid, like they're...
That's kind of how they are.
We're going to caricature them the way they've been caricaturing their victims.
Was she
Why
like
not?
Wagner's girlfriend or something? What she really was like all the way in, right?
I don't know about her. Like Nietzsche before he disavowed Wagner was friendly with him, in particular his wife Cosimo. I think he had a thing maybe for Wagner's wife. And the thing about Nietzsche is he was a would-be composer, and so he was always playing Ricard and Cosimo his own compositions, and they're just like, nah, you're not actually winning any awards there. Nice try, Friedrich. But Elizabeth Nietzsche's husband was a guy named Bernard Förster,
right?
Who was, kind of a Jew hater almost before it was fashionable in Germany.
It was always fashionable in Germany.
I mean, there's always going to be a current of it. But this is a guy who got fired from his school. He was a school teacher, and he got fired for ranting about the Jews too much. They must have a certain amount you're allowed to rant against the Jews in 1880s Germany. Tuesdays and Thursdays, yes, but Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays for calisthenics, sir.
That was a time, I guess, when there was it was less fashionable because this is what we love to say, fin de siècle on this show.
Fin de siècle.
Fin de siècle.
Fin.
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 We like to say it just because we know we get made fun of for our pronunciation.
But it was a time when new values were supposed to be ascendant, and maybe the dirty old anti-Semitism of the early 19th century wasn't in vogue. Yeah,
it hadn't been rebranded as the future. I mean, once you say, "Hey, guess what, Germany? Things are bad now, but I see the path forward, and it's blaming the Jews," then you can kind of paint it as the next new thing, the Übermensch. Mm-hmm. But it does seem a little old-fashioned, and that's how Nietzsche saw it. he was always writing about it as just kind of a stupid superstition of the past. But his brother-in-law, Bernard, does not agree. And after losing his job as a school teacher in rural Saxony.
Also probably because of the Jews.
Right. We say he lost his job, but who knows who pulled some strings. He started to organize his own little cult of believers in genetic purity.
Right.
And he finds 14 families to go in with him on a pretty harebrained scheme, which is to settle a remote part of the Paraguayan rainforest and create a new utopia for the purification and rebirth of the human race and the preservation of human culture.
Now,
and what that means is without Jews.
Without Jews. Let me ask you, is this the dawn of like Nazis in Central South America? Is this the first iteration of that, or were there German colonies already in Paraguay? Was he following some earlier pioneer? Why Paraguay? I understand after the war that Paraguay would be a nice place to hide.
But it goes the other way around. It's a nice place to hide because there's already a sizable German minority there. I mean, for much of the 20th century, Paraguay was ruled by a dictator named Stroessner, for a part German. You just get a tiny number of Germans in your gene pool, and one of them is going to be Generalissimo in like a week and a half. That's just how they do.
So Ken, we're getting close to the holidays here coming up, and it's time to encourage people to get some omnibus merchandise. We've been remiss in providing futurelings with the opportunity to have new, fresh merchandise to advertise their favorite podcast.
If you are a bipedal omnibus futureling with one head and two arms.
You don't have to be bipedal. You could have 7 legs, but 2 arms and a head. Or rather, 3 appendages of any kind that you want to clothe.
You need bilateral symmetry, or you're going to have a bad time.
You could buy
hold a mirror up to the center of your face right now, center line of your face, and if it looks more or less like you are eligible for this shirt.
If you had 6 appendages that were waving wildly, 2 of them larger than the other 4, you could buy 2 omnibus T-shirts and cover the joints, cover the connecting areas between your different tentacles.
Unless you live in a society where non-nudity is taboo.
Oh, sure.
And then you can only wear your omnibus T-shirts at home in the privacy of your own reef or shell. Thanks to our friends at Mediocrity, we have we've returned the 2 T-shirts that we had a couple of years ago. Omnibus and Futurelings are for sale through October. And then going forward, 2 new designs every month with we promise more stuff coming soon. We want, what do we want? Mugs and stickers and face masks.
Bound transcripts of all of our episodes bound in corduroy with gilt labels. Somebody
requested a onesie, which would require us to have sexually active listeners who are reproducing.
I believe that, or adopting.
Or adopting.
Yeah.
Well, there's other ways to reproduce. You don't think adoption counts as reproduction?
I'm not qualified to answer that question.
You could definitely drop the sexually active part. I'm with you there.
Right.
And the one location to keep an eye out for all of this is on the web at omnibusproject.com/store.
Yeah, omnibusproject.com/store. That's great.
We're like a real podcast now and everything.
And we're going to fill that store up with merchandise. We're going to have no-name brand omnibus merchandise that just says...
generic canned tomatoes with the omnibus logo on it.
Podcast.
Oh, that's actually a pretty good idea.
Yeah, podcast. Oh, wait a minute. A yellow shirt that just says podcast?
In the omnibus font, maybe.
Come on. That should be up there soon.
So check out omnibusproject.com/store for these and other brainstorms. So starting around 1885, Germans and other Europeans just poured into South America.
And was it part of the sort of German problem of not having a colonial empire to expand into, and so they were trying to do it ad hoc?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be people looking for a fresh start, and they didn't have an India or a
Congo.
or Congo to send people who just decided they wanted to start a plantation or whatever.
Right.
40 acres and a wildebeest. And so, just millions of Germans poured into, something like 3 million Europeans poured into Argentina between 1885 and World War I. And a big influx made its way into Paraguay, but I think the Firsters colony, which they called Nueva Germania, New Germany, was the first or among the first. Like, they were among the earliest adopters of this idea that, hey, for a fresh start in the kind of a troubled economy, we're going to avoid all these problems by going to Paraguay.
Nothing says to me German culture like the sort of
the jungles of Paraguay.
the jungles of Paraguay, just like redolent with the smell of pretzels and mustard.
But let me ask you this, John. In the Paraguayan jungle, you're wandering through the Paraguayan jungle for a couple of days. How many Jewish people do you usually see?
Oh, interesting. Well, there is a giant Hasidic population in Buenos Aires.
But I think that's a result of Central European
right.
immigration.
They weren't there already.
Right.
Yeah.
These guys were going to keep a step ahead of the synagogues by just jumping straight into the jungle. You see a anaconda, you can tell it's not circumcised.
There it is.
You're good.
There it is. The Uber snake.
And this is how he sells it to these kind of this coterie of rural families that starts to gather around his hearth while he tells them about how South America can be this spot in Paraguay he's found can be the new Naumburg on the Aguaria Umi.
Now think about the appeal. You're there in Germany. Like, this was the appeal. This was the appeal made to Germans for I guess about 100 years. There's not enough room in Germany.
Got to have some elbow room, some Lebensraum.
We can't do what we want to do here in Germany, which, I mean, I've been all over Germany. There's still plenty of room there. I mean, it's not like you can go just put a stake in the ground and call it yours, but I mean, you'd have to buy it from somebody. But
it's not like they're wandering through
it's a big
favelas.
Country.
Right?
No, there's a lot of room in Germany, and it's a beautiful country.
It's true that every time I've been to Germany, I've never thought, I got to get out of here. When's the next flight to Paraguay?
Right. I mean, what are you trying to do? And I guess what it is you're trying to create, not just get away from Jews. It's not just driven by xenophobia, but you have to have an animating idea that you're going to start a perfect new culture, right? That's not. You
can't do that just down the road from your old farm,
right? You have to believe that a perfect government is possible. That a utopian harmony is a thing that you could build if you just didn't have all the tarnish of past systems bleeding through. And so you need to get as far away. You need to get into the jungles of Paraguay to put your stake in the ground. And whatever your contemptible values are, you also need to at least believe that if you get all like people, for instance, together, then maybe, what are you trying to get rid of? Strife. You're trying to get rid of a lot of the time. You're just trying to get rid of marriage vows, but you're trying to get,
if it were just me and my buddies, it's some classic middle-aged guy thing, right? Man, life's so complicated now. If it was just me and my buddies, like in the old days,
me and my buddies and our hot wives and their hot daughters, and we could just go out and just build a new temple.
And land is cheaper, I guess. Right. Like, that's got to be one thing. I'm sure this guy got a deal in middle of nowhere Paraguay.
Bet nobody was guarding it. I bet it was just a thing where he built a fence around it and called it his.
Called it Nueva Germania. And this is how he entices these 14 families to his vision. He seduces them with this idea that it'll be a land of milk and honey. It'll be a life of ease. You'll have all these kind of native servants just bringing you your every whim and tropical fruits straight from the trees while you enjoy, ease and pleasure.
112% humidity.
Fred didn't lead with the weather.
Mosquitoes the size of birds.
Well, that's what happened. Like, he did not really give them a realistic idea of some of the hardships of crossing the earth to live in middle of nowhere Paraguay.
Because that plantation fantasy a plantation fantasy requires that you have a plantation, right? That you be growing crops and making money and exploiting the exploiting the local labor to create. But it's a farm economy. It's not just go out to the jungle and sit and read books.
No, somebody's going to have to be planting and harvesting corn and various starchy South American tubers.
Right. And not just for a subsistence life, but to sell on the market. You can't keep yourself in white linen suits just growing enough tubers to eat.
And this is what all the white millennials are forgetting who are planning their plantation weddings.
We're going to get letters.
No, I think the plantation wedding has finally been killed off.
Is the plantation wedding over?
I think. I don't know. Maybe there's certain segments of wealthy suburban Atlanta and Savannah that are still eagerly planning their post-pandemic plantation weddings. But if you're listening to the show, please don't.
I last year I went late at night and was walking around the campus of the University of Alabama. And, it's lovely. And sorority row in the, like with all the lights on in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. It really was like very evocative. And then I went the next day and realized like, oh, wow, it's all still here. None of it's changed. It's all just, there's a thin veneer, but it's all still alive.
So the colonists realized very soon that Bernard Förster and Elizabeth Nietzsche Förster's promises are overblown. Like on the voyage alone, suddenly they've got rotting food and cockroaches. It's not, they realize very quickly that reality is not going to match his golden dream.
And they're not even off the boat.
They're still in the, nowadays, if you wanted rotten food and cockroaches on the way to South America, you'd have to take a Carnival cruise. But this is a new experience for these guys who have never left their little rural Saxon villages. They arrive in Montevideo and then they realize it's a long ride up the Paraná River to get even close to the site of Förster's new utopia. And that's when the mosquitoes start.
Sure. Oh, they could have told by the jellyfish on the beaches. They knew when the ships landed.
Jellyfish predict mosquitoes?
It's the old adage, right?
It's jellyfish at night. Mosquitoes delight. There's like sand fleas burrowing under their skin, laying eggs. So it's just like, they had not considered the new flora and fauna. Despite all, and they arrive there, and what turns out is that it's like 11 hours on horseback to the nearest outpost.
Right.
And that makes it very hard to trade your corn and cassava and manioc or whatever it is they're growing. So even though in the first 2 years of the colony, he does attract 40 families.
Is that right?
Presumably by lying about how nice it is. A quarter of them leave after their first season because they see it's awful.
I guess the successful colonies always start with people who are so desperate to start over that they're willing to spend 10 years hacking and burning forest and living on.
That's why there's still people in Australia.
Roots and berries, right?
It's better than a jail cell.
You can't go without enough desperation. You can't just think you're going to show up somewhere.
And these people maybe were not quite desperate enough.
Yeah.
They had nice farms back in Saxony, and they were just told, the Jews, it's going to be good,
Right.
And then they got there, and they were like, there actually weren't any Jews in my village.
Yeah, and the farms were all...
the farms produced food, unlike this place.
Actually, there was a Jew in my village. I liked him a lot. I don't remember what the problem was.
He was always reading. What a fun guy. Anywho, back to the slave whipping. It turned out that for the Försters had sunk a lot of money into this, so they needed like 100 families to buy in just to stay afloat.
So how did Förster? Where did the money come from in the first place?
I assume it's all these people pooling their same, like any good cult leader.
Right.
The first thing you got to do,
it's a pyramid scheme.
The first thing you got to do is to tell all the original founders they're in on the ground floor, and it's time to donate what's under their floorboards. Or under their mattress. But, after a year or two, it becomes very clear that nobody's getting their money back because they can't get the goods out.
Right.
The farming's bad. The Försters are all, they're going to be vegetarians on their utopia, but soon they're all killing their animals for meat that they didn't want to have to eat. But, that's starvation. Förster himself sinks into debt, and then he sinks into depression and alcoholism. Just 2 or 3 years after starting Nueva Germania, he is dead of a morphine and strychnine overdose. Well, overdose. It's suicide if you take strychnine.
Yeah.
It could be a morphine overdose, but it's probably a morphine and strychnine suicide, unless a little bit of strychnine just really takes the edge off the morphine.
No, a little bit of strychnine does not take the edge off of anything. It's terrible. But I could imagine that strychnine could get put into your morphine.
Oh, you think it's a murder?
Well, that's the thing. If you're taking morphine and just like,
Now, you're not saying the long arm of international Jewry reached across the Atlantic and found him.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm not saying it didn't.
It's not. I mean, it wouldn't be the last time that Mossad found a culpable criminal in Central or South
I guess it's
America.
funny that it ends up kind of being financial mismanagement that kills this place because, I'm sure his people were proudly turning their backs on those evil intellectuals.
Yeah.
But it turns out maybe what you want is a couple nice guys with glasses and hats to look after the books. Maybe they could have brought along a couple Jewish accountants.
On the one hand, you don't want to this to have succeeded because it's terrible. But the problem is that rather than go to South America and start a new colony of Germans who want to be rid of the corrupting influence of Central Europe,
that's a nice way to say it.
That instead the people that had that impulse just decided to make that in Germany. And you don't want...
I see.
You don't want
if all the Nazis
had just gone to Paraguay.
We broke some windows in a couple bars, but you know what? Berlin's too small for this. And there's all these gay people in Weimar, Berlin.
Yeah,
let's just do this in
let's go to Paraguay and just make our whole new cities of glass there.
But you don't want to wish the Nazis on South America. What do they do to deserve it?
Well, that's the thing. You don't. But
you don't want them anywhere. Send them to the moon.
I wish that
Nazis on the moon.
This is the old. If you could go back in time, would you fund like a Nazi country in a undiscovered sand flea ridden part of South America? Why do I keep saying Central America? South America.
Just to avoid World War II, you mean? You still get a cruel National Socialist movement, but I mean they're still going to put Indians in camps, John. It's not going to be good.
Yeah, I guess I would have to look at the statistics to see how many people were living in that part of Paraguay. My sense is not very many.
I see. So you can keep the numbers down.
Keep the numbers down. That's right.
You're now part of some pan-dimensional time travel commission that can slightly nudge history.
Only 12,000 people were put into slavery.
We tried the Nazi genocide 80,000 ways, and
it had to happen somewhere.
If you put them in a very sparse part of the Atacamas, they can only get like 6 people in their camps. Northern
Greenland.
But you don't want them to get to space because then you give them rocketry.
Never let Nazis get to space. That's been a first principle for the last 80 years.
And they were really close. All the guys that got us into space in the last century were Nazis.
They were all Nazis. They were headed to space. Imagine what we would be like now if space was for Nazis.
Well,
the United States was still grooving down here, but space was full of Nazis.
Well, my life would not be that different.
Are you sure?
Well, what are they dropping stuff on me?
Well, everything we say
are they dropping copies of Mein Kampf from orbit?
It's all coming down from space. What if our TV signals went up, and then the Nazis got their fingers on them before it came back down?
Ted Turner tries satellite TV, and it lasts for like 6 months before the Nazis shoot it down, and then he's like, "Well, sorry, it's going to be broadcast TV. It's going to be syndicated hee-haw well into the 21st century."
What we've discovered, of course, is that cell phone signals do not actually go up to space and come back down. They wend their way around the world on undersea cables.
So that'd be fine. The Nazis wouldn't be, losing our calls.
I guess I'm going to go back to my original platform of no Nazis.
You weakened it for a second.
Yeah,
you were like some Nazis, but possibly in remote deserts.
Yeah. What if we put them somewhere like, I don't know, camps? No, wait. No. That's not.
You've become everything you hate.
Oh, damn it.
After her husband's suicide, Elizabeth Nietzsche returns to Germany in 1893, and as we've said, she takes over the full-time care of her brother, and she takes over his literary legacy. Her first book is a book about is in 1893, and it's about the glorious successes of Nueva Germania.
Uh-huh.
So you can tell she's not too beholden to the truth,
right?
And then she starts very selectively cutting her brother's unpublished writings and a lot of his earlier aphorisms in collections like Will to Power. And this is really how Nietzsche gets reinvented as kind of a prophet of the movement that would become Nazism, of the kind of the roiling undercurrent in Germany, right before and after World War I. Because Elizabeth, despite all the sand fleas still breeding her under her skin, or perhaps because of them,
Yes.
lives to be a spry 89 or 90 years old. She lives well into the 1930s.
Well, she was feted by the proto-National Socialists and then the National Socialists themselves.
She was feted by Hitler personally. Hitler probably never read any more Nietzsche than Richard Spencer did, and possibly less.
Yeah, hard to know what Hitler read.
Not a brainy guy.
Yeah.
But he, when he realized that Nietzsche's work as reframed by
He read
Elizabeth,
the aphorisms, just like every college student.
As Elizabeth Nietzsche reframes his writing selectively to support kind of a pro-nationalist, anti-Semitic vibe, Hitler thinks, well, I can use this. And so Hitler meets with Elizabeth Nietzsche, kisses her hand, is photographed kind of staring pensively at a bust of Nietzsche's tomb. He trots her out as kind of, the way political conventions now do, where, look, it's, even though it's 1970, Herbert Hoover's widow, for some reason, is at the Republican National Convention, that kind of thing. Yeah. Where she's some kind of a grand symbol of
the prophet.
Proud German heritage. Yeah.
Right.
The widow, essentially.
Sure. A connection to the old masters.
Right. And when she died in 1935, Hitler, in fact, attended her funeral. And over the last, so that's 30 or 40 years in which Nietzsche has no control over his legacy because he's either insensible, paralyzed, or dead. And she can say, oh yeah, when he said Übermensch, he meant, blonde, crew-cut weirdos.
Is there, in Nietzsche scholarship, is there a sense that his actual writing has been preserved and is interpretable outside of her influence, or was she burning his papers and cutting and pasting stuff in such a way that it's impossible to know his legacy?
No, there are plenty of Nietzscheans. Nietzscheans. It's two kind of schwas in a row. Who are kind of reclaiming his legacy from the pop culture Wagnerian version of him as a prophet of the Third Reich and 1,000-year reign of anti-Semitism.
But I mean, in his actual papers, like
decades of his work survives, and that's where you can look and say, hey, look, he's actually against race baiting. He speaks approvingly of the Jews. He's really against nationalism and violence. So I got some bad news for you, Hitler. There is some controversy. I mean, very recently, as the maybe 1990s or early 2000s, there's been new work on Elizabeth's repackaged Nietzsche. And, they find that, when she printed his letters, she printed a collection of like 505 of his letters. And it turned out that only 60 of them are verbatim, because she's gone through the rest of them with a fine-tooth comb, getting rid of things that are unflattering to her or to her vision of his work. And in fact, 32 of the letters are invented from the whole cloth.
Wow.
So she can just write, hey, Elizabeth, how's it going? I'm still hating the Jews today and thinking about how the Aryan is the Übermensch. Hope you're well. Love, Friedrich. So she can make him say whatever she wants. There is some movement among Nietzsche scholars today to say that Elizabeth is blamed too much, that she has become, in fact, a
scapegoat
and possibly a misogynistic scapegoat, like, this woman, getting in the way of his legacy.
Because some of her claims about him are true, or because some of the stuff that would be neutral about her work.
Yeah, that Hitler could have reframed his work anyway, that it's very easy, because his work does have a lot of this, all this muscular prose and beautiful poetry about the strong individual who must leave all the old strictures behind and invent a new, more permanent system that doesn't have all the depraved bourgeois nihilism. It's easy to take all this stuff and say, even if you're Richard Spencer and you don't know about the history, it'd be easy to read this and be like, yeah. And it's the same reason 7th graders love Holden Caulfield. Like all teenage boys are kind of borderline sociopaths for a few years.
It's why my compound in Big Sur, based on the writings of Ernest Hemingway, failed.
There is still, speaking of compounds, speaking of failed compounds, you can still visit Nueva Germania today.
Are there Germans there?
There are. There is a mix of, there's a people, a village of 500 houses living in really abject poverty. Like 16 of the houses have electricity. Even there's a kind of a Nietzsche museum there that does not have electricity, and you're going to have to find the old guy to let you in with his key. But it's a mix of German and Paraguayan people. Most of the surnames are German, but they mostly speak a mix of Spanish and Guarani, the local Indian language, at home. I guess it's an interesting visit because, well, it's still in the middle of nowhere, but there is, as of maybe the early 2000s, there's finally a paved road from Asuncion. Huh. So you're not coming in on jeeps or mules.
It's not an 11-hour mule ride anymore.
Yeah. Bernard Förster was just 100 years early. But apparently today it is still not a very viable concern. There are these kind of mock medieval towers as you enter the village that kind of have a Teutonic approach. And I think there's kind of an arched metalwork thing that says Nueva Germania in a way that is unfortunately reminiscent of, other German building at that time, including the gates of concentration camps, maybe. Right. But it just says Nueva Germania instead of some slogan about hard work. So there's still a lot of poverty there. There's a lot of inbreeding there because of the very small population. So to this day, you can see a high degree of ailments and weird physical malformations among the people. Today they largely grow yerba mate. That's the right crop there. The caffeinated leaves that they used to make that weird tea-like thing that South Americans love to drink out of a silver straw. But I don't know. Are we just too dumb to have discovered it yet? How come we're not all drinking mate if it's so good?
No, I feel like there are places in Seattle that you could go get yerba mate.
There's probably Starbucks in Seattle right now that are selling more mate than latte.
More mate than latte.
That's the slogan.
That's the new Ubermensch.
There is a street in Nueva Germania today named for Elizabeth Nietzsche. So that's kind of her last legacy, even though she's a scholarly and academic villain now. There is still a street in this tiny Portuguese village. But due to the faulty sign work, the sign says Elizabeth Nigtschen.
Nigtschen.
So they made her possibly Chinese.
Are you sure that that's not how it's originally pronounced?
Maybe we've been saying it wrong all the time. So everybody who is about to
Friedrich
email us angry about how we've been saying it, please switch to Nigtschen.
And that concludes Elizabeth Nigtschen. Entry 837.EX0204. Certificate number 42582 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are archived at Omnibus Project. If you would like to share your theories and debate the nature of man with me, I'm at John Roderick.
If you would like to join John's new utopia in Big Sur or elsewhere.
If you just want to retell Ken's jokes to him and make like unfunny Jeopardy jokes, he is at Ken Jennings. I'm also on Instagram at John Roderick. You can email us both at theomnibusproject@gmail.com, and Ken might share those emails with me if you mention me specifically.
If you're the 1 in 10 that mentions John. I just got a mean one that mentions you. Do you want it?
Is it mean about me or is it mean about you?
It's mean about us, but there's a paragraph at the end about you.
That's mean, or a paragraph about me at the end that saves the whole email?
I didn't read it. It was like, and to John, I was like, boring.
Why were they being mean to us? Was it somebody that thought they were a fan, but
it was
doesn't know the way to be a fan?
It was an extremely lengthy email from someone who said the show was really good, but it's getting political. Oh, like, why would you ruin a show about George Washington's teeth by mentioning his slaves? That kind of thing.
Yeah, you and I have been getting more political over time.
Have we?
Well, you and I were always political, but we've been letting it get into the show more because in the early days, we were choosing topics that were, I don't know, just sort of like...
They were fun.
Encyclopedia Britannica for kids.
There's an emu war. You'll like it.
Yeah. And then as time went on, boy, we just couldn't keep it out. We just couldn't keep our liberal bias out of the show. But I read a lot of letters from our conservative listeners who say, John and Ken's liberal bias does not put me off of the program because they're so cute and their dumb liberal ideas are so easily batted away.
At least they have a sense of humor. Like, often these come from the conservatives who are convinced that they are the left is the joke killers.
Right.
And so they're often the ones that are like, hey, you guys are funny instead of smug. I'm okay with it.
Well, I'm sorry if our political talk, not sorry if our political talk has made you feel like the show is no longer enjoyable.
But that is actually just your terrible privilege speaking, and you really need to work on that.
Right on. Well, that should put the smug references to bed.
If you were a good-hearted person, you would love everything about my podcast, clearly.
What have you got over there? You showed up today with a very large flat box, and you've just now unwrapped it.
This is something someone sent us back in August, but it was so huge I kept forgetting to bring it because it wasn't the size of normal mail.
In August? Oh, I thought you were saying August 2019. I see. August.
No.
Just a month ago.
Yes. Well, as we record this a month ago. I wrote you two via email a month or so back about a sword I was looking to disown.
Wait, I said that when you showed up, I was like, oh, it looks like they gave us a sword. It really is a sword.
I thought it was going to be like lawn furniture.
Oh, I remember this email.
The box says it's fragile, but also cursed.
Yeah, there's something about this sword that this sword has a dark provenance.
Nicholas says, I trust you will care for it, John, and make it at home among your other food for thought objects. Ken, I'm sorry there's nothing in this parcel for you. This letter sucks.
Oh, well, let me see it. Oh, maybe we shouldn't talk about it on the show because
it's cursed?
Well, I don't know.
It's wrapped in a thing. I feel like you, the owner, should be the one to take it out of its
let's see it. Yeah, well, the letter that we originally received said, this sword is problematic.
Oh, it is?
And
Is it made of George Washington's teeth or something?
And I'm either going to... What was it? The options were destroy it in a fire, except I don't want to pollute the fire with it, or I don't know, bury it in
one
the
of our
ground.
Zoroastrian followers?
So I said, well, I do have an eclectic collection of, I don't know if I would call it a problematic collection. It's not like I have the
Nazi sabers.
Yeah, I don't have any plateware from Berchtesgaden or anything, but I have books that on my shelves that probably.
I bet you have fewer weird Nazi books than most of the freshman Republican House class.
You're 100% true. Well, and I don't know. I mean, you have a giant Esperanto poster on your wall, the terrifies
everyone peeing in my guest room.
Terrifying globalist Esperanto. I can't unwrap this.
I have a Swiss Army knife.
The tape is cursed. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, maybe the sword is fine, but the tape is cursed. Seek the sword that was broken. In Imladris it dwells. I hope the U.S. Postal Service didn't do anything.
The U.S. Postal Service is amazing. I support them, even if they do break my.
They got us a sword that was cursed, and they did it in just a matter of a few weeks.
All right. Well, the problem with things like this is that, and I think this is true of a lot of people with a collector's mentality. We've talked about it on the show before. Like,
here, I'll open another piece of mail in the meantime.
What do you do with a thing?
Oh, this was Nadine that said she was going to send us masks.
Oh yeah.
She thought the masks we had recently been sent were a little baggy, and she wants us to have options in case our faces get smaller. And so she sent us masks from Unbelts. I guess it's true, they are not belts. They are masks.
I have modified our earlier masks to fit me better with a little, I put a little stitch.
Oh, you didn't just tighten the straps? You actually tightened it?
It needed a little stitch to fit seamlessly. And having put that stitch in there, they're great.
These are nice. Mustard, salmon, and slate blue. Charcoal gray.
Are they scratch and sniff? I don't want mustard or salmon in my
mustard. These are not colors of masks. We have. These are lovely, Nadine.
Oh, those are pretty.
Thank you for sending these unbelts, unmasks.
The salmon colored one is really nice.
Thank you, Nadine. We'll put
Okay, here,
we'll put
this-
photos of that on the Patreon. Finally, the sword is about to be unsheathed.
Yeah, about to be pulled from the stone here. All right, now I don't know, Ken, when you see this, how you're going to feel about it. Oh.
It is in a red sheath.
So I think what we have here is the
hilt only.
The owner of the sword had
Oh no, it is a sheath.
associated this sword with their grandfather's less than savory politics, and I think had described the sword as something as a relic of some bad organization. But looking at the sword, I can tell you that it is just a sword from the Knights of Columbus. Oh no! Wait a minute.
Well, the Knights of Columbus are...
No, I'm wrong. Oh, wow. Oh. This was I think this was a sword from the Knights of Columbus that got modified by an actually very bad...
A different kind of knight?
Look at this crest.
A different kind of fraternal knightly organization?
I don't even know if you want to look at it, Ken.
Well, let me see.
The crest there on the hilt.
Oh yeah, that's a Klansman.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It is. It's a clan sword.
Well, he's holding a
burning cross and riding on
a horse that has the the horse has what do clan horses wear? The horses have clan robes too.
Yeah, the clan horse hood.
Because they have racist horses with the cross on it, and then
Right.
he's got the triangular hood. Does it say Knights of Columbus somewhere?
No, I have quite a few Knights of Columbus and Masonic swords.
But that's just a fraternal organization. There's no overlap there.
Well-
so it looks like theirs, but it's
The Knights of Columbus are a Catholic fraternal organization.
Still
And
extant.
The Masons are an anti-Catholic. And
well, the Klan's anti-Catholic too.
right.
So
And they all get their swords at the same sword warehouse.
it's like Jostens.
Because I've seen a dozen of these swords, and I guess what it is they just put...
It's like
they
going
just
to
put a different crest
Yeah, it's
on
like going
them.
to the trophy store and they're like, "Sir, do you want the knife's hood, the bowler, or the?" Well, enjoy your cursed clan sword,
Wow,
John.
that really is cursed. Holy cow.
Are you going to get in trouble for sending that through the mails?
Well, no, because it said right on the box, cursed.
That's all you have to do. The
Yeah.
postal employee asks, "Does this contain anything fragile, liquid, perishable, or cursed?"
And if you put cursed on it, they're like, okay, keep it moving. Don't let it sit here next to these dead chickens.
You get what you get.
If you want to send us stuff, be sure before you send us any clan stuff that you send us an email in advance and say, BTW, I was either going to burn this in a fire, but I didn't want to pollute the fire, or send it to you. What should I do?
I don't know how you dispose of a clan sword.
Well,
Get the Eagles to drop it into Mount Doom.
Oh, when they wrote me, they said, maybe I should give it to a local museum. And I was like, I guarantee a local museum does not want it. I guarantee there is no museum in America that wants your great-grandfather's clan sword.
It's hard to think what the Puget Sound area museum is that would accept it.
Well, it's hard to think what I was thinking when I was like, you can send it to me. I think I just wanted to see it.
Well,
now I have it.
Well, it worked.
Oh, dear.
Well, he spent
$24.
He spent $24 mailing you this cursed sword.
Yeah.
So
How do you take a curse off of a clan sword? I'm gonna have to consult some religious
how many
authorities
racists do you have to
around here.
kill with that sword? It's like an exorcism.
You can send us actual things, at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155. We recommend that you go socialize on our Futurelings sites, although we can no longer endorse Facebook in any way, shape, or form. There is an active Futurelings group there that's maybe one of the nicest places on the internet, full of smart people, and I would like to detach it from its host.
You want to get it off Facebook and send it to Paraguay?
I mean, nobody goes to independent websites anymore, but wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if the Futurelings had its own site?
People are not going to remember a time when you had to go to the something forums
Yeah, right.
to discover a lovely community.
And you can give to the show in the form of monetary contributions at patreon.com/omnibusproject.
Listeners, from our vantage point here in the distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived, or if John just hastened it by opening a clan sword here in the bunker. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. If the worst comes soon, however, this very recording, like all our recordings, could be our final word to you. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.